Yeah, Usain and Dallas, and it was called like After the Ashes or something.
Wow.
I can't remember what it was called.
Not pretentious.
Yeah, and I was commenting, well, like, this is obviously a metal band name.
Oh, yeah.
And how would you three fit into a band? And I was like, oh yeah, Connor would obviously be on bass. And you were like, no, I'm not bass, I'm lead singer or guitar. No, that's me. And now, all these years later, you finally accepted your destiny.
All right, well.
And I feel upset in the way that my genius was not recognized.
All right, well, you
at the start.
You can claim credit for this. Are you ready? How's that?
Very nice.
Little Herbie Hancock for you.
Very nice. But yes, it's like when I told one of my girlfriends that she should read Ursula Le Guin, and she was like, "Oh, I don't think I really like fantasy," which was like obviously bullshit because she liked things like Sandman and stuff.
Yeah. Everyone likes fantasy. They just don't realize what kind of fantasy they like.
And then the ages later, I saw her status on Facebook, and it was just like, oh my god, Ursula Le Guin's so good. I love him. Like, shut up!
That bitch! How could she betray me like this? You always felt there was some dishonesty between you before the breakup, and now you know.
Yep.
She just couldn't acknowledge how correct you were about everything.
Exactly.
It's always the problem in my relationships, too.
I hold on to every time I was correct about something. And then, no matter how small or, like, insignificant it was, when I say something about someone and they're like, no, I don't think that's correct, I will remember.
You remembered a conversation from us years ago that I had completely forgotten. Waited 6-7 years to then be like, oh, you picked up a bass? Told you, bitch.
Told you so. Damn it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. For once, that is Phil's mouse you hear clicking on the other side of the Skype call. That's right, we're back on Skype because two men came on the show. He somehow infected all of my calling programs, and now they're even this will be inconsistent. What can you do? But Phil, I just want you to just enjoy something for a moment with me, all right? Are you ready? The intro song's probably faded out by now, so here we go. Ready? Wasn't that nice?
What, the loud fan noise?
No, just no one was constantly talking. There was silence. Did you enjoy that? I did.
It was beautiful, Connor.
Peace, you know?
Yeah, can't imagine what it would be like to be interrupted all the time.
As I said, responded to a YouTube comment expressing that exact sentiment. I'm Prometheus, and Tumen is the eagle that swoops by every day to eat my liver. I was sort of, a taste of my own medicine, I guess. I didn't like it. Talking to me must be awful.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Tumen is and was, like, even more so than you at your...
That's right.
Most interrupty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's partially because you have just made yourself a target for the youngins.
Well,
they now compete over ways to rile you up.
That's fine. The secret is, I'm never riled up. I'm cool, baby. I'm very relaxed. Anyway, welcome to Heavy Hands. I'm Connor Rebush. That sighing voice you hear is, of course, Phil McKenzie. And we are here to discuss what is technically a fight card.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Is it better or worse than the Hall Strickland card? I think it's marginally better, if only because it has one killer flyweight matchup on it.
Yeah, I think it's probably very slightly better.
Yeah.
And, Cannonier-Gastelum has a weird kind of appeal to it.
Yeah, I think the main event is, we may have just cut out there. Let's wait for that nice Skype sound as I continue to talk. I agree. Hall Strickland appealed to me, certainly, as a lover of just ass-backwards weirdo fighters. Cannonier-Gastelum is, I think, a little more straightforwardly interesting. There's a likelihood that somebody's going to get dropped, if not knocked out. Before I get into it, let's say we're going to do Cannonier-Gastelum. We're going to do Royval Pantoja, a killer matchup in the Flyweight division, the aforementioned best fight on the card. And that may be all we end up covering from this card because there's not a whole lot to the rest of it. So I think we're going to sort of discuss the standings of UFC divisions right now in our third segment. But let's go ahead. Cannonier-Gastelum.
Wait, Connor,
Yes.
I have a better idea. We're always talking about how we don't cover enough outside of the UFC, and we're always thankful that, we do. So I believe that this weekend, there is a Bellator event with a main event of Czech Congo Sergey Kharitonov.
Oh my God.
Huh?
Well, you know what, people? You can stay in suspense until segment 3 when it will be revealed if we talk about that scintillating matchup or not. It also, that's more of a Strickland Hall type of appeal. And that, I kind of like where your head is at, but.
It's got I think it's worse than that. Like, Strickland Hall was kind of let's see how these weirdos match up.
Yeah.
Well. It has, I think Kharitonov Congo is definitely a Bellator rubbernecking the car crash kind of.
Yeah. Surely they're both like 50 years old too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a car crash that, now that you mention it, I am kind of interested in absorbing. Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. I'm still chewing that one over. Let's talk about this UFC main event, though. Cannonier-Gastelum, as you said, it is a pretty good fight. It's got some, of course, some divisional relevance. Jared Cannonier seems like a guy who may never put together a particularly complex game, but he may have already started to surpass Kelvin Gastelum in terms of complexity on the feet. In fact, in a lot of ways, these guys are sort of similar. They are both very willing to tank damage. They are both highly dependent on one power hand. And I think it starts to get interesting when you look at the differences, many of which are kind of small. I think the most obvious one, which we had recent occasion to praise, Kelvin Gastelum's wrestling. Do you think that might play a factor in this fight? I think, on the one hand, I as we continue, I may end up thinking that it could be suicidal, but it does also seem like the one advantage Gastelum has that is not really Cannonier's wheelhouse. So, what do you think of the prospects of Gastelum bringing his wrestling to bear here, as he did against Ian Heinisch?
That's a really interesting question to ask.
Cannonier has certainly been out-wrestled to a loss in the past more than once.
Yeah. Because the main thing about this question is that it also hinges with the other major difference between the two of them, which is physical.
Yeah.
It's obviously that, Gastelum came up from welterweight, and most people were like, he should have stayed at welterweight. Ideally, he doesn't have the frame to be a middleweight. He's a stocky fighter, but ideally he's a welterweight sized person. Meanwhile, Cannonier was a reasonably sized heavyweight.
Yep. And a pretty beefy light heavyweight, and now just a very lean and extremely shredded middleweight. Stature wise, he doesn't look like unusually large for middleweight. No. But he's clearly very, very strong. I think we saw that profoundly in both his fights with David Branch and then Jack Hermanson, who seemed basically just shook by Cannonier's physical strength after his first 2 takedown attempts.
Yeah, so that's basically where it comes down to it for me, is that, I mean, Cannonier was, like, out-wrestled in spots by Whittaker, but honestly, like, less effectively than Whittaker managed to do against Gastelum himself.
True.
He's managed to get to his feet pretty quickly.
Yep.
Again, like, it wasn't that Hermansson had no success wrestling Cannonier. It was simply that Cannonier was kind of able to reverse and get up. I mean, I think it's a strange thing about Cannonier is that he hasn't been like a grappler, but it's because he has such a strange or at least necessarily a functional grappler, but it's because he has such a strange and outdated sort of approach to the grappling.
Right.
Where it's like,
we saw him really holding his own defensively against the likes of Glover Teixeira and Iwan Kutalaba. In fact, I thought his grappling looked quite good in the same way that, say, Uriah Hall's grappling can look quite good.
Yeah, that's a very good comparison as well, I think, because it's essentially that he will fight to stand up during the first takedown, and then once he is down, he's just like, okay, I'm down. Yeah. And it's all just guard play.
But, I mean, you say that. We haven't really seen that at middleweight. I think...
because we haven't seen him in a protracted ground exchange.
Yeah, but some of that is... I mean, he didn't even have the immediate attempt to stand up, really, at light heavyweight. I think he's physically stronger in comparison to his opponents at 185. B, I think he revealed in that very first fight against David Branch a serious technical and mindset development of just not accepting the takedown, and not getting into. So I think it remains an open question if, whether you can beat him in that scramble to the point that you can secure him in a bottom position if that old sort of passivity and defensiveness is still a part of his game. That I'm curious to find out. I don't know that we've really found that out at middleweight because he has largely just refused to accept takedowns and pretty quickly gotten back up when they happen.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think Gastelum is still relatively unproven as an offensive wrestler because those exchanges against Ian Heinisch, Heinisch is someone who sort of has not been difficult to take down at all.
Yeah.
That's because that's his route to victory. It's getting out-wrestled and then tiring the other person out.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure if I see it happening. And, like, other than that, has Cannonier's, like, modus operandi not been tanking damage from smaller people and then beating them up?
Yeah.
I keep thinking, like, is Gastelum dramatically different from, say, Iwan Kutalaba?
Right.
He's faster, but he's not like, and he's much more skilled than Kutalaba. I think we've been critical of Gastelum, but there's no doubt he's a much better fighter than Kutalaba.
This is really damning for Kutalaba, but Gastelum is more thoughtful and consistent.
Yes.
But
that was also a fight where Cannonier was able to just tank damage, as you said, much like Gastelum himself might.
Yep.
But also just keep throwing straight punches.
Mm-hmm.
The people who have really been able to get to Cannonier have been the ones who have been able to make him feel short, I think.
Mm-hmm.
People like Blachowicz or
Reyes.
Blachowicz working him over with the jab, or Whittaker doing something, very similar. Whittaker's ability to control distance.
Yep. Or Dominic Reyes uppercutting him to death.
Yeah. And it's definitely that you could see why those fights encouraged him to, well, at least the ones above middleweight encouraged him to drop down.
Yep.
But Gastelum is going to have to, he might be able to make some of that work with blitzing forward, but I find it hard to imagine that it's going to.
Yeah.
And Cannonier's major major development has been, aside from, the fact that he's just a more insistent defensive wrestler, is low kicking.
Yep.
So is he just going to be able to chop out Gastelum's leg to stop him from leaping through space? I mean, because he was sort of able to do that in part to Robert Whittaker, who's, as we've seen, much better at that style than Kelvin Gastelum is.
Yeah, Gastelum ate quite a few low kicks from Heinisch. He's just not really a consistent defensive fighter anywhere. Not that Cannonier is necessarily either, though I will say I think Cannonier has shown at a much earlier relative stage of his career somewhat better defensive instincts than Gastelum. I mean, Gastelum has always, there are always these moments of like, wow, that head movement was great. And then it just goes away. It's not connected to the rest of his game. You have to sort of like, I don't know, threaten Gastelum into a defensive mindset. And neither does it lead to counters, where Cannonier's does a little better. I think the kicks are likely to be a factor. I think another thing you sort of hinted at, calling back to that Iwan Kutalaba fight, we haven't had a ton of occasion to see this tested at middleweight, but I suspect Cannonier has better conditioning for a 5-round fight. That the Kutalaba fight was remarkable in that how consistently he was pressing and attacking, while, not cutting off the cage at all, but well into the third round. And of course, he shook Robert Whittaker up in the third round after getting his ass beat for about 2.5 of those frames. So I gotta wonder there if Cannonier is just a more reliable late round fighter than Gastelum, whose last appointment in the 5th round was him getting absolutely buzzsawed by Israel Adesanya. I don't know. Obviously not super comparable. I also, you mentioned Gastelum's speed, and there is also the southpaw thing to consider. Cannonier has not, he's only fought Anderson Silva, I think. I think that's the only southpaw, and Reyes. Though certainly the low kicks were still there against Andy. But, is Gastelum's speed what it once was? It has not looked to be there. Against Heinisch, I mean, if you can't surprise Ian Heinisch with the Gastelum left hand, who are you going to surprise going forward? And he really didn't land many of them. His success was largely dependent on the wrestling in that fight. So,
yeah, I think it's also, something we can probably talk about later. It's one of these ones where neither of these guys wins at age 12 at all.
True.
Who's the best win either of them can claim? It's basically Jack Hermansson, Cannonier, who is 2-1 since fighting him. Other than that, Kelvin Gastelum beat Ian Heinisch, who's, looking atrocious.
Yeah.
And that's all losses. That robbery split to Ronaldo Souza, who's retired, Bisping, who's retired, Weidman, who's gluing his leg back on, Vitor, who's doing insane things, Tim Kennedy, who's retired, Johnny Hendricks is retired. The last person that Kelvin Gastelum beat, who is still an active UFC fighter, is
it's Uriah Hall.
Uriah Hall, you're right.
How crazy is that? His first UFC fight?
Yeah.
Uriah Hall still kicking. Well, actually not in his last fight, mostly punching. Yeah, that is kind of crazy. I would say the Jacare one, I wouldn't say it aged too terribly. Jacare had that, I guess it depends how you weight Jacare's own wins. It was after that he had that, what I thought was a very impressive performance against one of the better versions of Chris Weidman, technically speaking, that we had seen. Mm-hmm. I love that fight. I think it's a middle.
Yeah, it's actually very solid, I think.
Yeah, a classic middleweight slugfest where Jacare, and against Hermansson, I think Jacare still showed some defensive craft, the body punching. I mean, he was a very crafty fighter for a very long time, and that just happens to be near the end of his run as an elite middleweight. But it's a fair point. Neither of these guys wins their records don't exactly speak to tremendous quality. You got to look more at the stylistic thing. I suspect Gastelum will want to bring the wrestling in. This seems like one of those fights where you don't want to keep spending your durability. Like, if your whole game is just eating shots, I'd frankly rather be Cannonier eating Gastelum's punches, especially as I strongly suspect, significantly slower Gastelum, than I would be, Kelvin eating Jared's. That just tanking Jared Cannonier's punches seems like an awful idea. And then the other thing is, if the wrestling does play into it, one thing Cannonier has proven pretty good at in this middleweight run is finding sneaky shots on breaks. He's actually a pretty solid clinch fighter all around. He's at least very consistent, which isn't surprising because he's a John Crouch guy. All those guys are really capable clinch fighters. But he's really good at finding his head position, maintaining his underhook. You know, like Hermansson failed miserably on one of his takedown attempts simply because Cannonier is strong and kept his underhook, and then he cracked Hermansson on the way back up. He cracked Anderson Silva in the clinch and on the break, and David Branch was after Branch shot in on the takedown. Cannonier stuffed it right in the first layer. Another thing he tends to do better and better as the fight goes on, and wasn't so worried about having defended that takedown that he was unable to then cut an angle and crack David Branch on the way out. Something Kelvin Gastelum does, one of the more consistent aspects of Gastelum's game, is lazy disengagement. Coming in and striking, often it's like an interruptive counter, which I suspect is why he has this bad habit of seeming to like feel safe after the exchange. If you stay there in range and send some straight punches at him as he steps back, you can crack him hard. And I think Cannonier can probably find those shots, especially if Gastelum does go for the wrestling, even if it is effective early. I just don't see it continuing to work. I just don't see it as a reliable path to a win in a 5-round fight.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Cannonier he's bigger, he's the more effective attritional threat. Like, yeah, Gastelum's wrestling worked well against Heinisch, but again, he wasn't able to control him for any significant amount of time. It was a competitive fight in essentially every single round.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that, you know, Heinisch doesn't really have any depth of skill anywhere.
Yeah.
Simply because Heinisch was tough and could scramble with him. I think the main thing that Gastelum has going for him in grappling situations, which we've called out a bunch of times, is his ability to jump to the back and choke people out.
But that is Cannonier's, part and parcel of the learning to quickly refuse the takedown and start standing up right away is exposing your back. Nobody else has been able to take advantage of it yet, but that is definitely a window for Kelvin Gastelum.
Yep. But yeah, I think, just in terms of attritional damage, in terms of size, both men have insane chins.
Yep.
I mean, Gastelum took an absolute mauling from Whittaker.
Yeah.
And didn't look particularly close to being finished, did he?
No. And from Adesanya, where he probably should have been saved by the referee in that last round.
Probably should have been stopped in that.
But even then, soaking up tons and tons of damage. Cannonier, above the two of them, is the one who's been knocked out.
Yeah.
But still.
But yeah, I remember Heinisch hitting Gastelum with a flush flying knee on a takedown attempt.
Yep.
And Gastelum just utterly ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be weird, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a strange fight. And it might not be particularly the thing about the sort of the ability to hold it into the later rounds, I'm not sure how high paced this fight's going to be. Yeah,
that's a question. For sure. Both of these guys tend towards singular strikes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is a question. And who knows, if Gastelum can, again, if your chin's going to fail after a long career of utterly depending on it, this could be the guy to finally crack it. But You also do have to wonder how does Cannonier feel if he cracks Gastelum with huge punches and this is the first guy who can just eat them? Even Robert Whittaker couldn't eat them. He had to change what he was doing to get away when Cannonier finally landed. Gastelum is going to afford him opportunities to land early and may still be able to take those shots. So that may be a factor as well. Cannonier is an insanely confident person, and I mean that in a very literal sense. But we'll see, I think he's more comfortable being a bully, and at the very least, Gastelum has proven really, really difficult to bully for his entire career. Yeah,
and Gastelum has also proven to be excellent at taking out old people. And it is worth remembering that Cannonier is, let me check,
he's
37.
37, that's true. He's past the age limit for where Gastelum can't beat people. Yeah, I'm going to pick Cannonier. I think having a more varied attack, having so far pretty solid-looking takedown defense, and more to the point, I think better answers after exchanges and after stuffing takedown attempts. I think those will be the round-winning shots for him. But yeah, it's still an open question. I think it's a pretty interesting matchup.
Yeah, I mean he's huge. He's got range tools which Gastelum doesn't, and range and attrition tools. Mm-hmm. And haven't really seen him. He might be old. Haven't seen him physically erode really.
Not at all.
He looked totally physically fine in the Whittaker fight. Mm-hmm. He got staggered by a head kick, but don't take anything from that in the slightest.
Nope.
So yeah, Cannonier for me too, I think.
All right. Well, after this break, we are going to discuss the real exciting fight on this card, which is Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. All of that, and no more after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Brandon Royval versus Alexandre Pantoja. That is it's somewhere buried in the card, but my God, is it the best fight on this entire card? Two thrilling action fighters. That is most of the time. Pantoja, I think of the two, he's the one that you can occasionally shut out of an action fight. Don't think Brandon Royval is going to have that in mind if his entire career is any indication. He's the Carlos Condit of this division. He's just nonstop insanity, and for better or for worse, kill or be killed, will just engage in a madhouse brawl with anyone and everyone. So, give me your basic understanding of this matchup, Phil.
So it's an interesting one because recently we saw Pantoja in a fight with, by now, someone we have to recognize as probably we just criminally underrated.
Yes.
Which is, what's his face?
Askarov.
Yeah, that guy.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever his name is. But
we're now overrating him, as you can tell.
No, but this is that was a fight with where Pantoja was able to be kept effectively on the back foot, to be kept off guard and wondering what was coming.
Oh my God. Wondering what was coming, you said.
Yeah, and Askarov just kept the pace and the pressure on Pantoja, so he wasn't sure of how to respond. So just on the merits of that alone, Brandon Royval should be able to trouble Pantoja somewhat.
Yeah.
Because
Askarov wore him out. That's the big thing. It's pace does seem like the sort of central piece of this matchup. Does Royval get to impose his pace on Pantoja or not?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also that, Pantoja in his own way is the Jeremy Stephens of this division.
Ah, yes.
In that he is quite slow-footed for a flyweight.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially wants to be able to know when it's okay to sit down and just bite down and throw.
Yeah.
He's a reflection of the priorities of flyweight as relative to featherweight. If you balance him against Stephens, because he's obviously much more of a scrambler and a backtake guy, but I think that's the same basic dynamic. You can keep him off guard if he doesn't know when to sit down. You might not necessarily hurt him, but you can take him down and you can beat him up on the feet whilst he's wading into you. And so the question is, can Royval do that? And I've got to say, watching footage, I'm not convinced that he can.
Yeah. All right, tell me why. I think I'm on the same page, but tell me why.
He's a super aggressive scrambler.
Yep.
But has been stuck in backtake positions against, like, the two good grapplers. I mean, he's only fought 3 times in the UFC, but both Tim Elliott and
Brandon Moreno
managed to have his back for like significant amounts of time.
Yeah.
Pantoja, as mentioned, is a back control guy who himself managed to backtake Brandon Moreno. So I don't think Royval has anything like the offensive wrestling that Askar Askarov has.
No, nor, and I think this is more to the point even, because I wouldn't be shocked if Royval could get Pantoja down, even if it's just a mess that leads to someone falling down, which happens a lot in his fights. It's more the positional grappling mindset, I think, that Askar Askarov, we saw how committed he was to fighting his fight because he had to deal with a ton of offense from Pantoja on his back in that first round. Pantoja from his back, I mean. That, there was a guillotine that led to the first takedown. Then there was a triangle attempt. Then there was an arm bar. I think there was a leg lock attempt later in the round. He was going for everything. And where Askar Askarov will deal with these threats in a very sort of big picture, more strategic kind of way, thinking, how do I defend this in a way that keeps me in this position? That does not seem to be Brandon Royval's mindset.
Yep.
He's like Tim Elliott, whom he beat in a way. He will just chase attacks and create scrambles. And so far, the antidote to that does seem to be, in addition to being able to match his pace, which I suspect very strongly that Brandon Moreno could have even if he didn't finish Royval in that first round. But beyond that, to lock him down. He's sort of like the ultimate flyweight in a way, where we have seen that trend of like anti-flyweight tactics going way back to Demetrius Johnson, but others since. How effective it can be when you take the endless scramblers out of their element by just sticking them in a position. And you find out like, oh, maybe their like static grappling tactics aren't that good.
Yeah.
Once the position is established. And yeah, it does seem like Pantoja's back takes are a clear avenue to getting to that kind of fight, which will prevent Royval from pushing a grappling pace on him the way Askarov was able to.
Yeah, absolutely. We've called out, back control really is very heavily prioritized at flyweight for that reason. The other thing is, I think, it's the difference between counterpuncher and aggressive counterpuncher with regards to like Pantoja, because Cara France is a good counterpuncher, but we saw that Royval is Royval is a genuinely pretty dangerous striker.
Yeah.
If you back into the fence against him, because again, he feints, he's very diverse, and he's very, very long, which means that his sort of lack of defense isn't so much of a question, because you quickly find yourself buried under offense before you have a chance to swing back.
Yeah.
Notably, Cara France did almost knock him out anyway.
Yeah.
And, you know, the only thing that really bailed Royval out was getting a completely insane spinning back elbow on Cara France after he almost got finished.
Thrown a second after, so he gets hit with a right hand right on the point of the chin, which does speak to his durability. It was a perfect counter right hand. Then, he tries to continue exchanging because Brandon Royval is fundamentally in boxing matches, there will often be a case where the commentators are like, this guy needs to hold. Why is he hitting? It doesn't work quite the same way in MMA, but Brandon Royval as a boxer would not hold. If he was in trouble, he would continue exchanging, thinking, now's my moment to land something really big. So he tries that, falls down because his legs are still gone, and then Cara France, trying to finish him, lunges into a spinning back elbow, which knocks him down in turn. Truly one of the craziest first minutes of the last 5 years. It was an insane, insane fight. But what you're saying, go on.
So there's a few things to say there. A, I don't think Pantoja gets himself backed up into the fence in the same way.
Right.
B, he got hit on the chin by noted not KO artist Cara France. If Pantoja hits him like that, he is going to sleep.
Yeah. I mean, I think Cara France does hit pretty hard. We saw that in that Rogerio Bontorin fight. The chips were down. He still hits hard. He's a good counterpuncher. But Pantoja is consistently, he's almost certainly the most consistent knockout artist in the division. It's him and Figueiredo, basically.
Yeah, he's probably the second. He is the second biggest puncher behind Figueiredo.
Yeah.
So there's that. And there's the fact that both after that particular after that exchange, they both just went into a complete Looney Tunes grappling war.
Yeah.
Where, all the advantages of Royval were able to sort of come to bear, and that he's, a grappling war where no one knows what's going on is exactly to his advantage.
Yes.
But, you got to think that in those situations, Pantoja wouldn't be backed into the cage. He would hit Royval harder, and once the grappling was initiated, he'd be more able to, he would be much more likely to win it.
Yeah.
I do find myself, looking back at, Pantoja Moreno, the first time around. And that's what happens if you try and be very aggressive against Alexandre Pantoja, and you're not either a high level phase shifter who really knows what they're doing, or you're not just Davison Figueiredo,
right,
in his athletic and physical prime.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think Royval is a little more Figueiredo than Moreno, even now. He's more offensively potent. In particular, the things that were really effective against Cara France, the knees. As you said, that's more effective when Royval's confident he has you reacting. And he can sort of chain these ideas together and get you to duck into the knee. But it's not like Pantoja, even when he has the initiative, is above just sort of hunkering down. He's an instinctive counterpuncher, Pantoja.
Yes.
He's not technical at all. He hits hard, and he's got a certain amount of timing, and, when you force him into a fight, he will throw back. But that's about as far as his counterpunching craft goes. Yeah.
I think, the other thing about Pantoja that I'm curious to see about the directional dynamic of this one.
Yeah.
Because I think it's actually in Royval's best interests to just absolutely go after Pantoja.
Sure.
like a complete lunatic. Because I think if he's on his back foot, I don't trust his ability to react to kicks.
No.
Like Tim Elliott is not the world's most dangerous kicker, but he was cleanly kicking up Royval whenever he had the chance.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Pantoja just he's shown that if he's, we saw in the cop fight, if he's chasing down a big gangly guy, he's just going to boot them in the body and legs a whole bunch.
Yep. Even the last round against Askar Askarov, when both guys were feeling the pace a bit, that is Pantoja's range weapon, is that big right body kick. No setup. It just slings it in there, but he hits hard. You have to respect it. And yes, Royval, he's not good defensively anywhere. So being on the back foot is just an arena in which he has to rely on his defense. It's not a good position for him.
Yep. So yeah, I think I've got to pick Pantoja.
Yeah.
Might pick him to knock him out.
It could happen. Or he might choke him out.
Yeah.
The other thing is that also leads me to pick Pantoja. I think Pantoja can actually, I trust him more than most flyweights to stop Royval from doing what you just laid out, from just pressing forward like a maniac. Obviously it worked against Kai Kara-France, whose first instinct is going to be to, maintain his distance, get to a position where he can walk you into a shot. Pantoja, as we already said, doesn't have enough craft to even think of that kind of counterpunching. He's more like, oh, you're smashing into the pocket, I'm going to start swinging, which is what we saw Brandon Moreno do to Brandon Royval. Royval was coming off that Kai Kara-France fight where that style worked so well for him. And almost didn't work, almost failed catastrophically, but that's part of the game for him. And, Moreno's immediate reaction was, frankly, it was kind of a Pantoja-esque performance in that it took Moreno a couple of hideous exchanges to remember that he has the best jab in the division and start landing it. And then the fight completely shifted his way. But I think the first exchange is a turning point of a kind where Royval tries to wade in, just slinging random ideas together. And Moreno just does not take a backward step. He just plants his feet and throws 5 punches. Mm-hmm. And, Royval doesn't really have much of any sustained success against Moreno in that 1-round fight. He's just kind of struggling to get in until the point where he is in fact fighting from behind. And I think it all comes down to, can you just stand your ground and dare this guy to crash into the pocket with you? Without taking a single backward step, I think Pantoja can do that.
Yeah, I think it's less about skill and more about just machismo.
Yep. Pantoja, of course, historically very durable. As we said, hits hard, has more of positional grappling mindset than the likes of Tim Elliott. He's more like Moreno in that regard, who shut down Royval without much difficulty. Great back taker. And yeah, the concern is just the pace. And I think if he makes the right decisions early, which I think those decisions due to Royval's style will be forced on him, then he can prevent Royval's pace from becoming an effective weapon by just shutting him down and or knocking him out. Also, we didn't mention, but this is Royval's first fight back after the Moreno fight, which was sometime in 2020. Was it November? So it hasn't been an insanely long layoff, but he did have a pretty bad shoulder injury. He not only dislocated it, leading to the TKO, but apparently tore his labrum, and according to him, broke several bones in his shoulder as well.
Which is it's a terrible look.
It's a really bad injury for any athlete to have. Shoulder injuries will nag you for the rest of your life. It's like injuring your back or your neck,
But it's also just try and make, when bits start falling off people for no reason in fights, it's rare that they look great after that.
Yeah, and it was kind of an inexplicable injury. It's possible something was aggravated beforehand. Royval had shoulder surgery on the other shoulder previously, but what leads to it, as far as I can tell, is like Moreno body locks him, trapping that arm, and Royval tries to wrench it out, and that's what pops his shoulder. That is not a very good sign. Whereas meanwhile, Pantoja has had like nothing but wars for years and years. He's had a very long career at this point, and as far as I know, no significant injuries. Still durable. You know, maybe some evidence that he's maybe a little less just overall confident since the Figueiredo fight, but I'm not willing to bank on that.
Yep.
All right. Well, Pantoja, it should be an insane fight as long as it lasts. You know, even as we're talking about Pantoja's ability to control being the perfect counter, he's not that controlled.
No.
Like I said, he's been in a lot of wars. But yeah, I think Pantoja is the pick to make. And we will see about Royval going forward, which might dovetail nicely into the discussion. Well, we haven't decided yet, actually. Are we going to talk about divisions, or are we going to talk about dumb heavyweights?
I think we can talk about dumb heavyweights for 10 seconds, and then
okay,
and then we can talk about divisions.
Okay, well, after this, then we will talk about maybe does the potential lack of future for Brandon Royval as a flyweight portend something else for the already harrowed flyweight division, and does that make it one of the weaker divisions in the UFC? Find out after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Phil, you have 10 seconds to talk to me about Czech Congo versus Sergey Karatanov.
Sergey Karatanov is doing remarkably well of late.
Yeah, he is.
And he is kind of the guy one of the guys who would sort of, I would expect to actually beat Congo at several points in their career.
Mm-hmm.
Because Congo either needs to physically neutralize people,
mm-hmm.
or he needs to, what am I saying? What am I saying? Or Congo needs to physically neutralize people.
Yeah.
And people who can just unload violence in the spots between Congo trying to clinch them, have always been bad news for him.
Yeah.
He's got shonky ringcraft. It's mostly just pushing people up against the cage. So yeah, I mean, screw it. You know what? I'm going to pick incredibly ancient Sergey Karatanov to replicate, like the old Roy Nelson win of just like Congo's going to make a mistake backing up against the cage, and then Karatanov will just charge him, winging punches, and knock him out. There we go.
I mean, you say incredibly ancient. He's 6 years younger than Czech Congo.
Jesus.
Czech Congo is 46.
Oh my God.
He has also been having remarkable success.
Yeah.
As a heavyweight. Again, you know, as we said last week, like the UFC's heavyweight division is really kind of the only very viable one in the sport. You know, that being said though, like among Congo's big win streak before the Bader fight and the Johnson rematch, you know, he did beat Volkov, who's now in the UFC. He beat Augusto Sakai, who's now in the UFC. He beat Timothy Johnson, who was in the UFC before that and has improved somewhat since, and Vitaly Minakov. So, like, he has also been having incredible success. And there is this thing where, like, I'm going to go way, way back to Congo Velasquez. There is this sort of thing where when you're kind of a lumbering striker who will follow Congo around and there's kind of a hitch in your striking, as there often is for Karatanov, especially in the early going, he can crack you.
Mm-hmm.
He's still remarkably fast for his age. But more and more, it is like Congo, just like it's what we would think of as classic Congo, just like holding you against the fence, smothering you, hitting you in the dick. 8 times per fight. And I think Karatanov, I guess I'm picking Karatanov. Why am I talking about this so seriously? Yeah, fine. Karatanov. Why not?
Yeah. I still, you know what? I genuinely kind of like Chet Congo.
Oh, yeah.
I kind of always have.
He's the sport's greatest survivalist.
Yeah. Like the fact that he's got a style like Safabek Safarov's, just like crammed into the body of a Greek god. I find that like genuinely, and you know, yeah, his general longevity. I find it oddly endearing.
The fact that like dirtiness is a fundamental aspect of his game.
Yep.
Yeah. It's hard not to, you know, respect him in a weird way. He's a true anti-hero in that he, you know, in MMA is full of people who think of themselves as the anti-heroes in action movies. Mm-hmm. Which makes Chet Congo the real anti-hero in that he's very boring to watch.
Yep.
Has no honor. But he's still hotter than all the other heavyweights. All right.
True.
Fine. Karatanov or Congo. I don't know. Whatever. I mean, Karatanov can't wrestle, so, you know, that seems like risky to pick him. Whatever. Let's talk about the UFC's divisions, since we've now had 2 occasions to touch on that subject in the last 5 minutes. Phil, you came up with an incredibly complicated rubric for judging UFC divisions. You've got 4 sort of brackets or fields here. Would you please
quadrants even
4 quadrants, if you will? Would you please read out the labels of those quadrants into which we will try to sort the UFC's divisions?
Good division fucked up. Good division working okay. Bad division fucked up. Bad division working okay.
And obviously the bottom left and upper right quadrants are the extremes of the scale. The worst division in the UFC will be the one in which it's bad division, by which we mean poor roster, and isn't functioning, by which we mean there is no clear path, working contenders up to the top, which is how a healthy division should function. Good division working okay, of course, is strong roster and sort of clear hierarchy or conveyor belt for up-and-coming challengers.
Yep.
So, well, where do we start? With the candidate for the worst?
From the top.
Okay, all right.
Start from the top.
Not my usual instinct, but okay.
Thank you, Connor. So, heavyweight. Bad division.
Oh, you mean start from the top in terms of weight, not not starting from the top in terms of which is the good division that works the best.
No.
Okay.
To do.
Okay.
Then we'd have to think about it. No, let's start from the big division. Heavyweight. Bad division.
Working okay?
I mean, I guess now that they've done their stupid interim.
Yeah. It's kind of working better than it has in a while.
Yep.
That being said, it does seem increasingly likely that Francis Ngannou is going to have like a Kane JDS situation on his hands. Where, I mean, Stipe Miocic was in the same situation. Like, any heavyweight champ, if they do manage to retain and defend, they just end up fighting. At most, there are like 3 good fighters in the division. Mm-hmm. At any time. That's really the best you can ask for. But for the moment,
and also the sport is so volatile, you're probably going to lose one of those fights, and you're going to have to get a rematch in there.
Yeah, Cyril Gane is right on the cusp of his like career-defining injury. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Can it really be said to be working okay? There's just I think I feel that way because
people are getting fights regularly in it, which we're not going to be able to say about at the top of the division.
All right,
which is more than we can say, and at least the undeniable number 1 contender is going to be fighting soon.
Okay, so if we imagine each of these fields as a sort of like a political spectrum type chart. Mm-hmm. This is bad division working okay, but way towards the middle of working okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So just barely
Very true.
Not in the worst bracket. All right, that brings us to the light heavyweight division. Which,
bad division.
Yeah. It's kind of working okay.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, we've got Teixeira, improbably. I mean, that's not a guy who's going to hang around as a contender for a while, but you need one of those in the division, right? A guy who's about to get his last shot. Prochazka is waiting in the wings as an interesting contender. I would say Rakic still has some potential in that regard. Magomed Ankalaev, still up and coming. Paul Craig. I'm trying to think of people.
Paul Craig. I mean, no, but Paul Craig is an example of division bad, not division fucked up.
Right.
Right? He's winning fights. Uh-huh. He's progressing. So I'm willing to say that this goes in the okay quadrant.
Yeah, and part of the okayification of light heavyweight it has been that unlike another division we'll be talking about, a few down the line, the old hangers-on have mostly been sorted out of the top 10 by now.
Yep.
So what
are you talking? Glover Teixeira.
There's Glover, but Glover's winning against
Yeah.
even against young up and comers. So it's not like a spoilers welterweight situation. He is fighting the tough young guys, and that has rightfully put him in a position as top contender. Guys like Shogun Hua, for example, would still be hanging on at welterweight by virtue of not fighting anyone.
Yeah.
Whereas, at light heavyweight, it's pretty much like guys who have risen to prominence in the last 3 or 4 years in this top 10. At least a good portion of it.
Yep.
So yeah,
agreed.
That division working okay in a stronger sense than heavyweight. At this point, I would say light heavyweight it stands well above heavyweight, while maybe having less interesting fighters overall, or less interesting than the top 2. It has no fight like Ngannou, Gane on the horizon, but as a division, it's far more functional. Okay.
Yep.
We're almost out of the quote-unquote bad divisions. Middleweight.
We're almost out of the bad men's divisions. Middleweight. Is it a bad division? I'd say it's kind of average. It sort of goes on the line. It goes on the borderline.
Yeah, I think it's okay. We mostly have the sort of fighters that should be irrelevant at this stage in their career are not particularly relevant in terms of ranking.
Mm-hmm.
Jacare Souza has been wiped off the map. Chris Weidman no longer in the top 10. Uriah Hall is still hanging around, but only barely, and was recently made fodder for what passes for an up-and-comer at middleweight, Sean Strickland.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got guys that I still want to see challenge Israel Adesanya. I'd love to see Robert Whittaker get a rematch. now that I think of it, who else do I want to see? Cannonier probably gets a shot with a win over Gastelum. Is he not just going to get tuned up?
Yeah, it's all just waiting for Kevin Holland to get the right mix of fluke wins.
Yep.
For me.
Still unjustly at 14 in the official UFC rankings.
Yep.
It's good. I think it's good division, but it's right on the border of between fucked up and working okay.
Yeah.
Because it almost feels like heavyweight, where there's really just one challenger I want to see, and he has already lost once.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's sort of like if you just imagine Israel Adesanya isn't there as the champion, it seems more compelling. Because
because he's cleaned out a lot of it. But I think that's I think it almost comes directly in the middle. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Welterweight. I think we know what this is. This is almost the case study for good division fucked up.
Absolutely. Now, having said that, there are, There are a couple, like Gilbert Burns is the exception. A guy who has risen through the division relatively recently, largely because I think like the good old dogs see him and they're like, I can beat this guy, and then they don't.
Yep.
So Burns is an exception, but he really does seem to prove the rule. Currently, Colby Covington lost pretty clearly to Kamaru Usman and has sat out since then, waiting for an undeserved rematch.
Come on, he had that incredible win over Tyron Woodley.
Oh, I forgot. That happened after Usman?
Yeah.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, he had the incredible win over Tyron Woodley. Leon Edwards is currently spending all of his time being on Twitter, sniping at Gilbert Burns, the number 2 and 3, unwilling to fight each other in turn, by the way, because I think Burns initially refused to fight Edwards, and now they flipped, and Edwards is really enjoying being in a position of being able to refuse Gilbert Burns, even though he really shouldn't feel that he's in that position at all. He's like the only, like, he is the most deserving contender in the sport that no one wants to see fight for the title. And he doesn't seem to realize that, so he's playing it like he's in Colby Covington's position, which he isn't even there. Vicente Luque, I guess, is the other guy who is climbing to a shot that actually seems kind of interesting. But then that's probably pretty much it for him as a challenger. And
he seems like he's climbing to a shot because they're trying to use him as RDA.
Yeah.
They're trying to be like, here's a Brazilian who will actually fight people.
Yeah.
Can we use him to leapfrog other people into potential contention to put pressure on the people that we care about in this division?
Yeah.
And then he's like, no, I'm just going to win. They're like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess we'll just keep doing this with you then.
Stephen
Which
Thompson.
Is, spoiler warning, exactly what Vicente Luque is going to end up doing next.
What's that?
He's not going to be fighting a number 1 contender spot, or at least not a number 1 contender spot.
No.
For him.
Yeah. He'll be fighting like Neil Magny or something.
Bilal Muhammad, probably.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Bilal, remember the name Muhammad.
Please.
But yeah, good division fucked up.
It's, like, it does still seem to benefit from having come after the 3 worst men's divisions. In that, Neil Magny will fight anyone. Bilal Muhammad will fight anyone. These guys are in the top 10. Michael Chiesa just got beaten by Luque, but is still someone who has been fighting anyone, and is kind of a new name in the division. So, but we still have, like, Jorge Masvidal and Stephen Thompson are still, like, in the title discussion. And I don't know. Leon Edwards is just a big friggin' stain on these rankings right now. And that's, again, he's too good for me to be speaking about him that way. But it is what it is. Okay, how about lightweight? Charles Oliveira, recent champ, a division where the belt just seems to pass hands constantly. Lightweight, but in comparison to welterweight, is, I guess, sort of the case study for a good division working okay. And that there is... Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Like, it may be in a bit of a transitional period right now, after Khabib's departure, still.
Yep.
But, there's a lot of guys I'd like to see fight for the title. Guys like Ferguson, Tony Ferguson are still in the process of being sorted out of the top 10, but largely that is a residual ranking. Because not only has Ferguson lost, albeit to good fighters, he has lost utterly without even looking remotely competitive. So, and Ferguson is a guy who will, I think, largely fight whoever he feels he has to. So he's probably not long for the top 10.
Oh. I think, yes, especially now. I think...
I'm saying he's definitely not deserving at the moment, but sooner or later he's going to get a fight that ousts him. He's going to lose to the worst guy yet and will no longer be ranked as if he's still a contender, which he isn't.
Yeah, and arguably, it seems like there's that could very well happen with Conor McGregor.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Conor McGregor could get unjustly thrust back up into the rankings with a win over a completely shot Tony Ferguson.
Yep. And I've recommended that is the fight that they should make for a while now, because honestly, I think Tony deserves the payday, win or lose, and also deserves the chance to like fight someone who might be as shot as him. Even if I wouldn't favor him in that fight, he deserves the opportunity and the money. So yeah, I think lightweight, good division, better division than welterweight. It's less fucked up than middleweight.
Yeah.
Even though it has Conor McGregor in it, he's no longer... Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this has been saved... Honestly, this division has been saved a lot from the gravity of both Khabib and Conor, because that was keeping things on... that was keeping things weird for quite some time. And now that it's just like, oh, it's just super good fighters, and, you know, Conor McGregor is a sideshow, it feels like it's much more functional.
We are still feeling the aftershock of that, because part of McGregor's sideshow is that he's currently holding up the number one contender in the division in a series of increasingly one-sided fights. You know, Dustin Poirier, I think, justifiably has way more interest in fighting McGregor than he does fighting for the belt, because it makes him more money, and that is ostensibly one of the major reasons to go for the belt. So that it's a little bit like that. I'd say it's a better division than light heavyweight. It's working about as well.
Yeah, I'd say slightly worse, just due to the fact that I'd put light heavyweight and lightweight both behind heavyweight, just because everyone knows that the person at the top of that division is not really the best fighter in the division. It's not really like not really the lineal champ, or like the person who is the actual.
Okay.
Like, Charles Oliveira is fantastic as the lightweight champ, but you're also just like, Khabib is still the best lightweight in the world, and then the second best is probably Poirier.
Yeah.
I don't think Charles Oliveira has a better recent resume than Poirier does.
Yeah. Or maybe Gaethje's in that conversation as well.
Yeah. So I think heavyweight is actually, has as bizarre as it is actually slightly more functional than either of those two at the moment.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It feels wrong to say that. It's definitely a worse division. I'd much rather watch the dysfunctional
division, yes.
dysfunctional lightweight show than the very functional heavyweight show.
Okay, let's keep it going. Featherweight.
Women's featherweight, you mean?
No.
Does that wait? Are we not even considering women's featherweight?
No, we'll just.
It's so stacked.
We can do the women's divisions after the men's divisions.
Women's featherweight has.
I mean, women's featherweight is obviously the bottom left. It's not literally the platonic example of that division fucked up.
It only has one fighter who holds the belt. It's so stupid. All right, men's featherweight. Good division working.
Yeah.
Not working maybe as...
Volkanovski's been kept on the shelf for a while, but
yeah.
Other than that, he's undeniably the best fighter in the division.
Yep.
It's a sensationally good division.
Got a couple of up-and-comers.
I'm sorry. Holloway robbery stands. He's probably the best fighter in the division.
Volkanovski.
There's, people can debate whether he won the fight or not, but he did.
Sure. The fact that he sort of had Holloway figured out in the first fight and then spent the second fight in the process of figuring him out by the end. I mean, both of those definitely speak to his abilities as a fighter.
And also he won on the cards, and even if you just want to balance the two fights against each other, he won one super clearly, and the other one was a real toss-up.
Yep.
Holloway can't say that.
Yep. You got a couple of up-and-comers sort of knocking on the door of the top 10. You got Movsar-Evloev. Ilya Tupuria has been getting good wins. Bryce Mitchell, I think, will continue to be a very impressive fighter. And Giga Chikadze has also been getting increasingly impressive wins and looking more comfortable as a mixed martial artist.
Mm-hmm.
Arnold Allen, still working his way up through the division, had his most impressive win to date pretty recently. And you got a couple of old dogs hanging around. Or people that seem in a very precarious position. I'm thinking like Yair Rodriguez and Korean Zombie. But, yeah. I mean, Josh Emmett's there. This to me is like almost this is right there with bantamweight in terms of good division working okay.
Yep.
Or even just in terms of good division. The roster at featherweight is fire.
Yep. Yeah, I think people have, there's little elements of welterweight hanging on in there. You know, the fact that Chan Sung Jung, Rodriguez, and so on, and Brian Ortega, frankly, there's sort of, as I said, there's initial indications that there might be that there might be old person win trading going on.
Yeah.
Which is what you don't want to happen.
Yeah.
With those guys. But, overall, yeah, it's still healthy. It's still functioning. You can get to the top by winning fights.
Yep. And even, you know, like maybe he saw it as a winnable matchup, but Dan Ige impressed, did a really good job fighting Korean Zombie, and that was Korean Zombie fighting a lower ranked fighter. And, I think Ortega at least is more justifiably than someone like Leon Edwards waiting for his title shot. That's fine.
Yep.
All right, bantamweight then. The most exciting division in the entire sport.
Yep.
Pretty undeniably. It's almost as scrambly as flyweight, and probably it's also as knockouty as like lightweight.
Yeah, if not even more so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we debated about whether featherweight and bantamweight were the best, and maybe featherweight was the best division, but I mean, there's just so many prospects coming into bantamweight that you're just like, oh, this guy looks great. And this guy looks great.
Yeah.
And this guy looks great. Bantamweight's got to be the best division at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, it looks like featherweight has more, like top 15 fringe, top 10 fighters that are right about to break in.
Mm-hmm.
Bantamweight, it's like there's a lot of older guys still being sorted out. You know, Frankie Edgar is still in the top 10. Whether or not Cody Garbrandt is going to hold on to a ranking, I think remains to be seen. Jose Aldo, at some point, it's got to stop working, although, as we said last week over and over, probably one of his finest ever performances in his last fight. And then you've got guys that I'm not sure about, or like I'm pretty sure Rafael Assunção is not long for any kind of ranking. Jimmy Rivera, I have serious doubts if he can work his way back up. Cheeto Vera may have found his ceiling. Cody Stamen, likewise. These are all in the fringe of the top 15.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Merab Dvalishvili, who else is coming up? Rob Font, Sandhagen is still viable against Jan. I guess, yeah, there's enough. But I almost feel like featherweight is a stronger division, as far as the functional conveyor belt aspect goes.
Yeah. That is possibly true. But yeah, I think in terms of the sheer strength of the division, it's the amount of people that are just, you know, could break out in bantamweight.
Absolutely.
I mean,
there are guys who aren't even ranked yet
Yeah. Song Yudong, Sean O'Malley, Nito Lopez, Julio Arce just dropped down there.
Mm-hmm.
Nathaniel Wood, Honey Barcelos.
Oh, yeah.
Said Nurmagomedov. Who else? Randy Costa and
Adrian Yanez, yeah.
And Yanez, like just the amount of quality that division throws up the whole time is boggling. I think it's the best division.
True. Right
now. I think you have to consider it when you can just be like, you know, you can have just fights that people care about because they have great fighters in, but who otherwise no one's heard of. Mm-hmm. Like you can have not necessarily no one's heard of, but you can have your your Honey Barcelos against, oh god, and I forgot, Timo Valiev. Or you can have your Randy Costa versus Adrian Yanez, and they just blow your socks off.
Yeah, absolutely. It's undeniably the division full of the most exciting fights.
Yep.
Which should be Flyweight should be contending for that title. Flyweight historically really.
Oh, wait a minute, how screwed up are we saying bantamweight is? I don't think it's very screwed up at all.
No,
really.
I think good division working okay. It's not. I think
is it more or less than featherweight?
Works a little less well than featherweight at the moment.
Okay,
that's my opinion.
In part because you can't say that the best fighter in the UFC is the champion.
That's certainly part of it. Flyweight, I think, should be contending for most action-packed division. It has in the past, whether it's a grappling fight or a striking match. There's just stuff always happening, nonstop action. But man, is it still hurting from when they just chopped it down to like 7 fighters.
Yep.
Davis and Figueiredo did not put on a performance that necessarily suggests he will, resurge into the contender picture. That remains to be seen, but it was not a good look. Askar Askarov, as we said, way better than we thought he was, has been very impressive. But otherwise, Pantoja, I guess there's a story there that he has beaten Moreno twice before. So that's something. Alex Perez, I have my doubts, but it remains to be seen if he, can work his way into the title picture. Joe Benavidez really shouldn't even be ranked anymore. He's the Tony Ferguson of this division, unfortunately. Brandon Royval, great action fighter, but realistically in another division probably wouldn't be top 10 because he's too reckless. And then you start to get into like top 10 middleweight territory where it's like, yeah, this guy's good. He's got one thing he does really well. And that's it.
So the question is flyweight worse than middleweight?
Is it worse than middleweight? It at least still has something of an interesting title picture. You are not interested in Israel Adesanya fighting Robert Whittaker at all. I am, but that's it. But that's it.
You're not more interested than you are any potential matchup at flyweight.
I think I would still see Pantoja Moreno. I would very much like to see Askarov Moreno. Yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
All right, fine. It's worse than middleweight. It shouldn't be.
Is it functioning better, worse, or the same than middleweight? It's functioning okay. I think it's actually like a decently functioning division.
Yeah, but I think
in part because it's so thin.
Yeah, but
you have to go up.
But it's on the cusp of not working. It just needs more people. Bring Dustin Ortiz back for fuck's sake.
Yep.
Bring back Dustin Ortiz. Pay Zachary Makovsky money. Bring in some goddamn flyweights. And there's a million flyweights I'm sure I haven't heard of. Who would be great additions to this division. It's worldwide, flyweight is actually a fairly deep talent pool. It's if you restrict yourself to looking in the US and Western Europe for fighters, of course the talent pool is going to be small because we're all big, tall, fat people. Go to places where everyone's little and you will find good fighters. Flyweight, or its equivalent in boxing, which is featherweight, is an amazingly deep division. Featherweight's one of the best divisions of boxing and has been for decades. 125 pounds should not be difficult to find a deep roster. And there are many that they cut recently. We lost Horiguchi. We lost Dustin Ortiz. It's a joke. It's a joke what they did, and the division is still, I think, in a way reeling from that. Okay, on to the women's divisions and the final 30 seconds of our episode. Women's bantamweight. Bad division, fucked up.
Yep.
As you sort of, again, another case study for that. I will say I'm interested in seeing what Irene Aldana can do. She's getting better. I really enjoy the ways in which she's getting better. I don't have particularly high hopes for her against Nunes. Nor do I for Aspen Ladd, who is the other, person who hasn't fought Nunes yet. Otherwise, Jermaine Durand to me is still holding on to a number 1 ranking. Holly Holm is in the number 2 slot. Juliana Pena is the one who's about to fight Nunes, or was supposed to, and she's not going to fucking win that fight. Yana Kunitskaya, who I hear was recently allowed to fight while pregnant, is number 6, and she is essentially just another Holly Holm, and I would never ever pick her to win the championship, even if Nunes wasn't the champion. It's not a good division, and it's not working. Cool. What about women's flyweight?
Bad division. Working up. Okay.
Is it?
Yeah, you get a title shot against.
That's true.
If you just string together wins, you get a title shot.
That's
against,
true.
Valentina Shevchenko, who just slots you effortlessly. Why wouldn't this has really been one of the workhorses of the modern UFC, because they're just like, well, we need a title shot to. This is the. It's
the bum of the month club.
Yeah, it's the corn syrup of UFC cards. They're like, oh, this needs beefing up in a cheap way. Shevchenko will take a fight because it's easy. I guess you're right. There still are enough women here that have yet to fight Shevchenko or yet to, be fought by her. Joanne Calderwood, Jennifer Maia, I think has a case where she could work herself into a rematch. She's so far had the most competitive fight with Shevchenko in the division. Lauren Murphy is absolutely not going to win, but she's right on the doorstep of a title shot. And Jessica Andrade has been working her way up as well. So I guess you're right. Bad division. This is the most functional division. I'm going to say it. That's really weird. Absolute trash. It's really weird. If you just fight and you win more than the other people, you will get a title shot. Is Hector playing with some sort of electronic mouse? No, it's just a regular mouse. It's a squeaky catnip toy, which he is currently savaging. Savaging, yeah. He's really kicking the shit out of it. Having a good time there, cat. Okay, so we've got the bad women's divisions out of the way. The good women's division. Yeah, I almost thought I caught an S on the end of that word. It's the one good women's division. There should be a women's atomweight, which is another pretty strong talent pool, but at least more so than flyweight or bantamweight by a long shot. But women's strawweight is the bantamweight or featherweight, men's bantamweight or featherweight of the women's divisions currently in the UFC. I say good division working okay. Yeah. So are we saying... So I would say it's probably better than middleweight? I think so, because I would not... Joanna Jędrzejczyk is still holding on to a ranking. She's the closest you get to like a fighter that just can't be ousted, like the classic heavyweight contender. But I would still watch her fight Rose Namajunas again. All of her fights are incredibly exciting. It's hard to... Even if she's lost 2 in a series, why not make it again? Zhang Weili versus Rose Namajunas. I'm not sure what's happening there with Weili Zhang, but would happily see a longer version of that fight. Unfortunately, we should have an incredibly strong, exciting contender in Tatiana Suarez, who has just had a life full of bad luck that has not stopped since getting to the UFC. But we've also got Mackenzie Dern and Marina Rodriguez. Yan Xiaonan, not a bad fighter. Maybe more on the sort of middleweight side of just kind of good at one thing, but she's pretty good at it. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's on par with middleweight. In that it has more fights that I want to see the champion in. It has a less certain title picture, which is a little more exciting. But it probably has more, realistically, it probably has more prospects in. True. Amanda Lemos is on her way up. Amanda Hibash, still a viable prospect or at least up and coming fringe contender. Who else though? Yeah. It's tricky. It's kind of between it has shades of welterweight with Joanna and Carla Esparza and Nina Ansaroff or Nina Nunes rather, and Claudia Gadelha still holding spots in the top 10. But it's working okay, I would say. Yep. Okay. Well, that's all of them. Honestly, we have a lot of, I think, pretty functional divisions. And fortunately for us,
the most functional divisions are also just the deepest and most fun at the moment. Bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight, women's strawweight. And even to an extent, I would say these days, I think middleweight is more exciting than welterweight. And that division's okay.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, there's your filler discussion. I'm just going to go ahead and go back, and since we're at like almost 40 minutes on this segment, I'm going to cut out the Czech Congo Karatanov talk.
No.
No, I won't really. I don't like to edit. Okay. Well, Phil, anything to plug?
Not at the moment. I can think. I can think of.
Well, I'm still working on something, but it should be done soon. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet, but it should be done soon. That's all. Find us on social media at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil on Twitter, that is. I'm at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. Find our writing when we do it on bloodyelbow.com. And make sure you check out our Patreon. We have already had 2 bonus episodes out this month. And as I have mentioned several times, I'm sitting on 2 commentaries that will also be out before the month is out. So look forward to those. It's $3 a month. You get access to all that shit. And you support us, which is really the real reward. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week when we have Barboza versus Chikadze as our UFC main event. Okay. Talk to you then. If you came here today for the Final Points on Facebook, you came to the right place. It's been Heavy Hands. But you're more of a tea drinker, aren't you? You're a
No, I don't actually drink that much tea.
Oh, really?
I drink more coffee. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't follow. For some reason, I'm letting, despite my
profound Britishness,
looking and sounding like a British cliche, I've let the side down.
Don't like soccer.
Yeah.
Don't drink tea.
Yep.
And you hate the fucking Queen.
Bitch.
That was the ex, right? Just posting on Insta, you know. Oh, Ursula Le Guin, we do enjoy it. Like, you fucking... How could you?
How could you, after all those sexy, sexy times we had together? One does enjoy the Sandman. Even Gaiman's earlier works. But I do not know about reading these books.